Hosea always believed in the power of love. A good and righteous man, he had a clear mission in life: to be God's voice to the people, a prophet who showed the right path. But then God asked him for something no one expected, a test that would shake the foundations of his heart. He was to marry Gomer, a woman who was unfaithful, a woman whose choices had distanced her from everything good. Hosea didn't hesitate. He knew that somehow love would be the key to changing that story. His heart believed in something greater than the circumstances. Even in the face of critical eyes, he followed his path, determined to transform both his life and Gomer's with the power of forgiveness and redemption. Hosea was known for his kindness and unshakable faith. Respected as a prophet, he was a man who brought words of hope to his people, guiding them through their hardest moments. His heart was wholly devoted to God's will, and his life reflected his principles: honesty, justice, and compassion. To him, love was the foundation of everything. He believed that no matter how far people strayed from the truth, there was always a chance for redemption. One day, during his prayers, Hosea received an unexpected command. God spoke directly to him: "Go marry a woman of improper conduct, for the people like her have abandoned me." Hosea was stunned. How could this be? A man of principle like him, destined to unite with a woman whose reputation was stained by infidelity and lack of commitment? But Hosea knew that God's voice never failed. Though the command was difficult to understand, he trusted in a higher purpose. His love for God and his unshakable faith led him to accept the challenge. He knew that somehow love would have the power to transform Gomer's fate, and perhaps inspire others to see beyond human flaws. And so Hosea went to find Gomer. When he saw her for the first time, he noticed a deep sadness in her eyes. She was a beautiful woman, but something in her spirit was broken. Her life had been marked by difficult choices, by paths that led her to the disdain of many. Yet Hosea didn't just see Gomer's flaws. He saw an opportunity to bring light to the darkness hovering over her soul. Gomer, on the other hand, was surprised by Hosea's proposal. Accustomed to being seen as unworthy of true affection, she hesitated. "Why would you do this? You know who I am, what I've done." Her voice trembled, a mix of distrust and pain. But Hosea, with a calmness that unsettled her, simply replied, "I know, and that's why I'm here. Because you deserve more than the choices you've made. I believe in you." They got married, but from the beginning, the relationship was marked by challenges. Gomer, used to an unstable life, struggled to adjust to her new reality. Though Hosea treated her with respect and care, she often felt undeserving of such love. She would flee to her old habits, seeking comfort in fleeting relationships, unable to comprehend the unconditional love Hosea offered her. Despite everything, Hosea didn't give up. Every time Gomer drifted away, he brought her back, not with anger or judgment, but with patience and compassion. He knew that true love wasn't easy. He knew that transforming a life required more than words. It required action, persistence, and above all, forgiveness. As time passed, Gomer became pregnant. They had children, and Hosea believed this could be the beginning of a new chapter for them. However, Gomer's old demons still haunted her. She still felt trapped by her past choices, as if she could never escape the identity they had built for her. Hosea, on the other hand, continued to pray. He asked for strength to keep moving forward, even when the path seemed impossible. And amidst it all, he began to understand something important. His story with Gomer mirrored God's relationship with his people. Just as Gomer strayed from him, the people had also strayed from God. But just as he continued to love and forgive Gomer, God, in his infinite goodness, continued to love and forgive his people, despite their mistakes and infidelity. Hosea realized that his mission wasn't just to save Gomer, but to be a living symbol of God's unconditional love. His marriage, with all its difficulties, was a representation of divine grace that never gives up, always offering one more chance. Hosea's love for Gomer wasn't ordinary. It was a love that defied all expectations, a love that saw beyond faults and mistakes. And gradually Gomer began to realize this. She still felt trapped in her past, but something inside her started to change. Hosea's words and actions slowly began to break down the walls she had built around herself. The story of Hosea and Gomer is a powerful reminder that true love isn't based on perfection. It survives flaws, pains, and finds strength in redemption. As time went by, Gomer remained at Hosea's side, but the emotional scars she carried seemed too deep to heal. Though she was now safe with her husband and their children, something inside her continued to resist. Late at night, when silence enveloped their home, Gomer faced her deepest demons. The echoes of her past haunted her, and she wondered if she could ever truly live at peace with herself. Many times she felt an overwhelming guilt for everything she had done, for the pain she had caused Hosea, who had always stood by her. Hosea watched these oscillations with concern. He understood that love wasn't an instant cure for all of Gomer's wounds, but he believed that, in time, the power of sincere affection could overcome the shadows haunting her. Yet, his acts of kindness weren't always accepted or understood by her. Sometimes Gomer felt suffocated by the stability that to Hosea was a sign of progress, but to her represented a danger, the fear of losing her freedom, even though that freedom had led her down a path of pain. Hosea knew his journey wouldn't be easy. His days were filled with uncertainty about Gomer's future and the fate of their family. As a father, he devoted himself to his children, trying to create a healthy environment for them, while his wife struggled with her own internal battles. He tried to maintain a strong facade, but inside he also had his doubts. How far could love truly take them? One night, after a long silence between them, Gomer finally broke the emotional barrier that had kept her from speaking openly to Hosea. "You don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm not good for you. I'm not good for anyone." Hosea looked at her with sadness but also with unwavering determination. "I know who you are, Gomer, and what you were doesn't define what you can be. What matters to me is what we can build together. I'm not here because of your past, but because of our future." Hosea's words deeply affected Gomer, but not in the way he had hoped. Instead of bringing relief, they stirred up even more anguish. Gomer stood up and left, with no particular destination, simply wanting to escape from something she couldn't handle: the unconditional love he offered her. She didn't know how to accept that kind of love because throughout her life, she had never truly known it. For her, love was always transactional, something that required exchanges and sacrifices. The love Hosea offered, however, was a gift, something that asked for nothing in return. And that frightened her. Hosea spent the night awake, praying for his wife, trying to understand where he had gone wrong. He knew the problem wasn't him, but the weight Gomer carried. Still, the pain of her rejection hit him hard. He wanted to be the solution to her suffering, but he was starting to understand that it might not be so simple. However, the situation grew more serious when Gomer didn't return that night, nor the next. Hosea waited, anxious, and began searching for her. He asked the neighbors, walked through the city streets, but found no sign of his wife. Fear gripped his heart. He knew the dangers Gomer could face by returning to her old habits, to the people and places that had only harmed her. Days passed, and Gomer's absence weighed heavily on him. Hosea continued searching, asking around in places he knew she might have gone. Some people looked at him with disdain, unable to understand why he insisted on finding a woman who had been unfaithful so many times. "She doesn't deserve you," a merchant told him. "Leave her behind and move on with your life." But Hosea couldn't do that. He knew that true love doesn't dissolve because of failures. And he knew that his mission wasn't just to restore Gomer, but to teach the world what it meant to forgive and love unconditionally. Finally, Hosea discovered where Gomer was. She had returned to the life she led before meeting him, living in a state of extreme degradation, handed over to people who treated her with no respect or dignity. She had become trapped in a web of abuse and exploitation, and the news of her whereabouts broke Hosea's heart. Yet instead of feeling anger or resentment, he felt a wave of compassion and a renewed desire to rescue her from that life. Determined, Hosea went to the place where Gomer was being held. She had fallen into a situation where she had essentially been sold for exploitation. When Hosea saw her, he could barely believe what his eyes were witnessing. The woman he loved so deeply was there, lost, subjected to the will of others, her gaze empty as if hope had completely abandoned her. With his heart shattered, Hosea did the unthinkable. He bought her back. He paid a high price to free her from that situation, even knowing that she had chosen to leave him. At that moment, the symbolism was profound. He was willing to redeem Gomer no matter the cost, just as he believed God would always redeem his people, even when they turned away from him. When Gomer realized what Hosea had done, she was overcome with a mix of shame and disbelief. "Why did you do this?" she asked, tears filling her eyes. "I left you. I don't deserve this. You should have left me here." But Hosea, with the calmness that always accompanied him, replied, "My love for you isn't conditioned on what you've done. It's conditioned on what we can still become." For the first time in a long while, Gomer cried openly. Everything she had tried to suppress for so long finally came pouring out. She wept not only for the circumstances, but for realizing that, despite everything, someone still believed in her worth. Gomer's journey, which had begun with fleeing from love, was now transforming into one of acceptance and healing. Returning home, Gomer and Hosea's relationship still needed much work. Their love wasn't a fairy tale where, after one noble act, everything became perfect. But Hosea's gesture was the catalyst for something greater, Gomer's transformation, not just into someone capable of receiving love, but into someone finally capable of forgiving herself. Gomer now faced a new challenge. She had to accept Hosea's love, and more importantly, learn to love herself. She had spent so much time living according to the judgments and expectations of others that she no longer knew who she really was. Hosea's rescue had freed her from a terrible situation, but the emotional rescue would be a much longer and more painful process. Their children, now a bit older, began to understand the complexity of their parents' relationship. They sensed, in their innocence, that there was something special about the love their father had for their mother. Hosea never stopped demonstrating his affection for Gomer. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. Every gesture of care, every moment of patience, was a constant reminder of the commitment he had to his wife and the family they were building. But as much as he was faithful and compassionate, he knew he couldn't complete Gomer's healing journey on his own. She would have to walk part of that path herself. Weeks passed as Gomer tried to adjust to this new life, which now seemed foreign to her. She was safe at home, surrounded by her children and Hosea's love, but something inside her still resisted. At night, when the house grew silent, Gomer faced her greatest demons. The echoes of her past haunted her, and she wondered if she could ever truly live in peace with herself. Many times she felt immense guilt for everything she had done, for the suffering she had caused Hosea, who had always stood by her side. Hosea watched these internal battles with empathy, knowing that this was a journey Gomer would have to face alone. He understood that no matter how much he wanted to, he couldn't force her to accept his love or forgive herself. She would have to discover this in her own time. Then one day, Gomer finally gathered the courage to speak openly with Hosea about her feelings. "I feel like I owe you," she confessed, eyes fixed on the floor. "You've done so much for me, but I don't know if I can be the woman you deserve." Hosea, with a deep sigh, took her hands in his. "You don't owe me anything, Gomer. Love isn't a debt. No matter what you've done, what matters is who you are now and who you can become. I chose to love you knowing all your flaws. Not because I'm perfect, but because I believe love has the power to transform." Hosea's words touched Gomer deeply. It was difficult for her to understand such unconditional love, but for the first time, she felt truly free to accept it without reservation. That was the turning point. Slowly, she began to allow herself to feel worthy of Hosea's love, and most importantly, began to seek forgiveness for herself. As Gomer worked on her emotional recovery, the community around them also began to change its perception. For years, many had judged her harshly, considering her unworthy of any kind of redemption. Whispers and reproachful looks followed her wherever she went, and Gomer always felt small under the weight of others' opinions. But Hosea's act of rescuing her from degradation was a turning point not only for their family, but also for those who watched from afar. Some members of the community began to see Hosea and Gomer's relationship as an example of love and redemption. The fact that Hosea had not given up on his wife, even after so many failures and humiliations, touched many hearts. For those who also carried their own mistakes and secrets, their example became a source of hope. Gradually, people stopped talking about Gomer's past and began to recognize the strength she showed in trying to rebuild her life. Still, Gomer's life was not without challenges. Every day was a choice, an effort to leave the past behind and focus on the future. And there were days when she almost broke down, when doubt crept back into her mind. But in each of those moments, Hosea was there to remind her of her worth, not just as a wife and mother, but as a person loved by God. The true climax of their story didn't come in one grand dramatic scene, but in small moments of internal victory, when Gomer began to see herself as Hosea saw her, worthy of love and redemption. With every step toward healing, she grew stronger, and that strength began to show in her actions. Gomer, who once avoided interacting with others out of fear of being judged, now began to participate more actively in community life. She volunteered for local activities, helping other women who faced difficulties similar to those she had experienced. Her past was still remembered, but now not with scorn, but as proof that anyone, no matter their mistakes, could be transformed by the power of love and forgiveness. And so the story of Hosea and Gomer, which had started with distrust and pain, transformed into a journey of healing and hope for many. Gomer over time began to feel something new in her heart. A deep gratitude for the husband who never gave up on her, and for a God who gave her a second chance, even when she thought she didn't deserve it. As the years passed, Gomer became a central figure in the community. Her story of redemption was constantly remembered as a symbol of hope, a reminder that love and forgiveness can open doors to a new life. It wasn't just her recovery that impacted everyone, but the way she dedicated herself to helping others in similar situations. Every word she spoke carried the weight of someone who had known darkness but found light in Hosea's unwavering love, and eventually, in the love she learned to have for herself. Hosea, on the other hand, remained a discreet man, though his presence was equally important. He didn't seek recognition for his actions, but the respect of the community grew over time. Many men came to him for advice, not only on family matters but on life in general. His wisdom, demonstrated not through grand speeches but by the way he lived his life, touched the hearts of those around him. The support group Gomer started expanded and became a network of mutual help. Women who once felt ashamed of their failures now found the courage to talk about their problems. Gomer welcomed them with kindness, offering not just advice but a friendly shoulder. She knew better than anyone how difficult it was to escape a life marked by mistakes and regrets. But she also knew it was possible to start over, as long as there was support, patience, and love. This initiative did not go unnoticed. Soon, other communities became interested in the work being done. The story of Gomer and Hosea spread, reaching even distant places where people who had never met them personally heard about their story of overcoming and inspiration. Other groups began to form, all inspired by the philosophy of redemption and transformation through love and compassion. The idea was simple but powerful. Everyone deserves a second chance, and the true strength lies in extending a hand to those in need. Gomer, now much more confident, began to travel to share her story. Invitations came from all over the country, and she traveled with Hosea always by her side. She spoke with sincerity and emotion, never hiding the most painful details of her past, because she believed authenticity was the key to connecting with those who were lost as she had been. The impact of her words was visible. People were moved, cried, and felt encouraged to face their own internal battles, knowing that, like Gomer, they too could redeem themselves and find peace. One of Gomer's greatest achievements was realizing that her personal journey, marked by so many failures and pains, served as a path of healing for others. She had turned her greatest weakness into her greatest strength, and that was the true legacy of her story with Hosea. The understanding that love can change lives, that the scars of the past do not have to define the future, and that there is always hope for those willing to believe in redemption. Hosea and Gomer's children grew up with a deep understanding of the value of forgiveness and perseverance. They had witnessed a story that in many ways defied society's expectations. To them, Gomer's mistakes were never the focus but rather her ability to overcome them, her determination to change, and the unwavering example of love demonstrated by their father. Each of them followed their own path, carrying with them the lessons they had learned over the years. The impact of Gomer's life was felt for generations. The women she helped rebuild their lives also became examples in their communities, spreading the lessons of compassion and healing. Thus, the message that began with Hosea's love for Gomer grew and multiplied, like a seed planted in fertile soil that became a strong and fruitful tree. With every story of recovery, their legacy continued to live on. Gomer and Hosea grew old together, and in time, the intensity of the emotional struggles they had faced in the past was replaced by a deep peace. Their marriage, which once seemed impossible in the eyes of many, became a model for other couples. Not because it was perfect, but because it withstood the toughest trials. They had learned to deal with each other's imperfections and, more importantly, to accept that the true strength of a relationship doesn't lie in the absence of problems, but in the ability to overcome them together. One day, as they sat side by side watching the sunset, now much older, Gomer turned to Hosea and said, "I would never have made it this far without you." Hosea, with a quiet smile, replied, "We made it this far together, Gomer. It was love that brought us here, and it's love that will continue to guide us." They spent the final years of their lives in peace, witnessing the impact of their actions reverberating in every life they had touched. Love, the true kind that Hosea had believed in from the beginning, had not only transformed their own lives but those of countless others. Hosea and Gomer's story is an eternal testament to the power of unconditional love. Though they faced trials and challenges that were nearly unbearable, Hosea's commitment to loving Gomer, even when she strayed and got lost, revealed to the world the true essence of forgiveness and redemption. Their story serves as a beacon for all those who feel unworthy of love or lost in their own mistakes, showing that there is no mistake so great that love cannot overcome, and no soul so lost that it cannot be redeemed. Hosea and Gomer are remembered not only for their personal journey, but for the impact they had on others' lives. They proved that, while the path of love and forgiveness is difficult, it is also the most rewarding. Their legacy lives on in the stories of every person transformed by the power of that love, and the example of their lives continues to inspire generations. In the end, the message is clear. True love isn't measured by what is easy but by what it is willing to endure.